Hello everyone, I'm Danny from the Birmingham City Observatory and I'm joined by Sal, the Assistant Director for Insight Policy and Strategy. We're going to show you how to complete an Equality Impact Assessment form, an EIA. We're going to show you some of the features and Sal's going to talk about equality. He's going to hopefully guide you through the sections, help you figure out what you should be thinking about and what you can put into these boxes. First of all, let's dive straight in and show you the form. The form is just a basic Microsoft form. Probably very familiar with these already. Each page is going to guide you through. It's going to give you links to guidance, best practice, tools such as the City Observatory that are going to help you fill out the form and get a better picture of the city of Birmingham. For those that need it, we've also made accessibility accommodations. On all questions on all pages, you can click the little immersive reader icon and you'll get big text. And if you so wish, you can click play and have the screen reader read out all the wording to you. To start off with, we're going to have a little introduction video, which you can watch on your own time to explain what is the Equality Act. Most of an Equality Impact Assessment is heavily focused around the Equality Act of 2010. So it's important that you understand the Equality Act. So the first question I'm going to ask is, are you aware of the Equality Act? If you click yes, you can continue in the form. If you choose no, the form will end and you have to go back and start again and understand the Equality Act. So let's click yes. And then we're going to ask what you want to do next. You can go straight to the form, which is great for those that have done these before and just want to get right into filling out the form. Otherwise, you can go through the guidance to find out all the various information about the EIA. So let's quickly whiz through there and just see what we've got. So the first thing we're going to ask is, why do we need to complete an EIA? Sal, tell us, why do we need to complete an Equality Impact Assessment?
Thanks, Danny. Well, it's a legal requirement. The form, what we've tried to do there is, instead of having to go to multiple places for different sources of information, the form actually tells you why you need to do it. It falls under the Public Sector Equality Duty. It's under the Equality Act 2010. I'm not going to go through all the kind of statutory necessity for why you do it, but there's 9 protected characteristics, and you will come across that language a lot. Age, disability, sex, gender reassignment or gender identity, marriage and civil partnership, pregnant people and those on maternity leave, race and ethnicity, religion and belief, and the final one, sexual orientation. I know that sometimes in equality impact assessments, other things are considered, but for the purposes right now, we are just sticking to the legal requirement, which is the 9 protected characteristics. And the point of conducting these equality impact assessments is that we want to avoid any possibility of discriminating against the protected characteristics, whether that is direct or indirect, because whether we do it by design or by accidentally, just through the things that we are doing, that is where we will be met with legal challenges, and that is something we want to avoid, Danny.
And part of the form is to actually prompt you. So when you're coming into this, you may not already be aware of all of the impact that your project's going to have on the community. So by coming through the form and the prompts that we have, we're hopefully going to allow you to think a bit more detailed about what impact you're going to have, and then make those accommodations later down the line. A big thing of the Equality Impact Assessment is around discrimination. Is the work you're going to undertake going to cause any level of discrimination to any of those protected characteristics? And again, by breaking down the characteristics and prompting you at various points, it's going to allow you to think about how that's going to impact people. Next, the guidance will take you to the page on when do I need to complete an EIA? When should we complete an EIA, Sal?
Well, we should really always complete an EIA where we think there's a potential impact against any of the protected characteristics, Danny. I think this is about really us thinking differently and this not being a tick box exercise. The thinking around whether there's an impact against any of the protected characteristics, we need to think about that, in a much more day-to-day way. It could be against decisions we're making, it could be against the policy we're changing, out with some of the big structural things that we're all having to grapple with at the minute. We need to think of it much further upstream, and this form helps us to do that.
Thank you. Now, here's a big one. Who is responsible for the EIA. We do have an equalities team, but they are merely the custodians of the forms. Is it safe to say, Sal, that the responsibility lies on the directorate themselves? Later on, we're going to ask a question around who's the officer, accountable officer. And in normal cases, that would be people like yourself, Sal, an assistant director. Who do you think is responsible for an EIA?
It ultimately falls on the directorate, Danny. As you've just said, the equalities team there are a central resource, and any equalities advisor is in the organisation are there to support and advise on equality impact assessment. And the work that we're talking about here is another example of that in a more structural way. But the actual responsibility falls on each directorate, and the ultimate responsible officer, we'll come to that later, will be the director or the the assistant director.
And for that reason, we've built in an automated approvals process, and we'll come on to that later. If you need to change something in the EIA, we are yet to implement a ability for you to go back into your form and change things. So if you do need to change anything, you need to drop an email to the equalities team. We'll pop that email up on screen later on. How to conduct an EIA. It's all about evidence and judgment. It's down to you to go through each of these characteristics and assess how they are going to impact. We've got a best practice guide, which will allow you to get an overview for the process before you take place. Sal, how would you start your EIA process?
I think I would start by coming to the guidance and thinking about as soon as you have an idea of whatever it is you want to kind of do, Danny, whether it's a change in policy process, something more substantial, to have that conversation with the equalities team, probably at the start of the process, to see, well, how do I want to approach this? We have, and you will come to this in the form, we have quite a lot of evidence, information, and insight on the City Observatory, which means that you might not need to start from scratch. You may well be able to kind of find the information that you need, which helps maybe even at an early stage start to kind of answer your questions on, well, where could this potentially impact in terms of the thing I want to change, alter, or amend.
You mentioned the City Observatory. It's an open resource available to the entire public. On here, you'll find data sets, but also insights, ready-made reports that we've produced, visualizing a lot of the data. Some of the main ones you may going to use are the area and ward profiles. This allows you to build your entire own geography as your choice, north, south, east, west, or particular wards, and view all the details for that area. Population, demographics, ethnicity, unemployment, health, lots of metrics at an area. Census is very similar, except it's more city-wide. This will show you a picture of the city. It will show you where certain ethnicities are more located. It's great for if you want to plan new buildings. Are you building them in the right place? And we go down to the output area level. This isn't just showing you a ward. It'll break the ward down into its building blocks and show you where the ethnic groups are located, religious groups, age groups. It's a great resource to get a big picture of the city. We've also got a number of other tools. Have a little look on the observatory and just see if there's anything there that might help you out. As we go through the form, we're going to tell you key facts about each of those protected characteristics, but also provide you with direct links to resources which will help you make better decisions. Now we've gone through the basic guidance, and remember, at any point you have the option to skip straight to the form. Let's get straight into equality impact assessment. Here we've got the email address for the equalities team. So as Sal mentioned, these are our equality experts. If you ever need help, email them. When you submit the form, you have a choice of a draft or a final submission. A draft might be that you just want to go through the form and get a feel for how to complete one. You may be ready to submit. You might think you've got all the information you need and you just need to submit a form ready for approval, in which case you would choose final submission. For the purpose of this, I'm going to choose final submission. The subject of the EIA. This could be the name of your project. So let's come up with a fake project. New community center. and a brief description. So here you can enter a very short description about what this is going to cover. So a new. And then you'd probably detail which wards they were. So what is this equality impact assessment in support of? You can choose up to 4 options. So we're choosing a new service, and that's what we're talking about, a new community centre. And how frequently will you review the impact assessment? Because it's important you don't just do this and think it's done. Your service or policy may require you to review the impacts. Sal, what would you think about when choosing how often to review the service?
I think it depends on the director, and I think it depends on what the change is. So for instance, if it's something which has been particularly controversial, so say it's something pretty big, which we're going to speak about now, um, moving the location of a leisure centre, that's something which will have required probably an extensive amount of consultation. It will have been through, in a good robust exercise, and it might be something you want to come back to annually, in terms of it's a location, it's a kind of fixed move. But in terms of policies, I think it's good practice to review policies quite regularly. So these are things which will require subjective kind of considerations and judgments, Danny. It's pretty difficult to come up with a kind of one size fits all steer here, because it really does depend on what that is, and then also it depends on the kind of directorate's preference on that. But the key thing is to review it. That's the key thing.
Okay, so we've chosen annually, and now we're going to choose when the first review needs to take place. So let's choose December next year, just before Christmas. Now, this is where you choose which directorates are going to be responsible for this EIA. It may be that you are producing this and it's going to span a number of directorates. So you can choose as many options as you like here. I'm going to choose my own directorate. I'm also going to say this is going to also affect children's and adults. Anything with a little star is mandatory. So we'll also ask for your division. And service area is an optional box. This is a very important box. Who are the officers? This is where you start taking responsibility. So the responsible officer is the person who's filling out the form. And it's important that in here you only put an email address, because these email addresses are going to be used for sending notifications and copies of the form. Don't put any names, don't put any brackets, just put people's email addresses in there. And here we're going to put Sal as the accountable officer. The accountable officer will receive a notification asking them to approve or reject. And when they approve or reject, they can leave comments. This is important because this is where they take responsibility for the form and say that they're happy with it or not. If the form is approved, Equalities will mark it as approved in the system, and it's recorded, and we can report on it. If they reject and add comments, the rejection email goes back to the person you named here for them to make changes. Now, it's important, remember I said at the beginning, we can't change these at the moment. You can't open the form. So try and make sure that you've got the information you need, you're reasonably aware of the process from watching this video, and you come into it with a better understanding. Data sources. Now, this is where you get to say what evidence you've used to produce this report. Where have you gone and what have you done? Data sources can be data from our own observatory, consultation, interviews, relevant reports. This is your chance to say what you've used, and next box down is give more detail. What would you do for data sources, Sal? Where would you go?
My starting place would be to look at the City Observatory, Danny. Maybe I'm slightly biased, but I know the amount of data that sits there, and I know the amount of specific work that's been done to tailor it for Birmingham. So for here, for instance, we're looking at the move of a leisure centre from one area to another part of Birmingham. Here, I know that the team have done some really good work on breaking down Birmingham by wards and ward profiles. And the leisure centre potentially doesn't just serve one ward, it serves multiple wards. And the the tool that you're just demonstrating allows us to understand the demographic breakdown in multiple ways in the wards, not just by one ward, but by multiple wards. So you can understand the kind of communities and various things that the leisure centre serves currently, but also to move to another area, what would that kind of geography look like? So you can kind of start to really get into the detail and that understanding in a much more granular way than was possible previously.
And here I'm demonstrating how we've chosen 2 wards, and the great thing about the tools are they're fully interactive. So if you were to click on a particular ethnicity, it will show you we've got a much higher density of ethnicity in ACOX of white British in ACOX green than we do in Alum Rock, and conversely Asian and Asian British, it's a mirror image. And these are little building blocks are called output areas. This is where we break the ward down, that's one ward, that's another, into building blocks. So you can see it's not just the density of the ward, but where within those wards are. So make sure you have a look on the observatory. It's a really fantastic tool. This is just one of many tools that will help you make better decisions across your day-to-day duties. So we've chosen the data sources we've gone to, and we can put in more details there if required. Now we're going to get to the protected characteristics. So we're going to have one section per protected characteristic. First one being age. Each form follows the same layout. If we need to, we're going to define what is that protected characteristic. Age, I think you've already got a good grasp of. Any key facts about Birmingham that you should take into consideration and find out more. Here we'll have links to City Observatory, Birmingham Council, and possibly other areas such as the Public Health England to help you make better decisions. So here we've got Fingertips, which is Public Health England, which is going to have some real great insights around the health of that area. Then we'll ask, does it impact people due to their age or protected characteristic? If you say yes, if you say no, it will skip to the next characteristic. If you say yes, we'll start asking more details. This will allow us to quantify information. So here we're going to ask what age groups are going to be impacted. And it allows us very easily to then just pull up information around the ethnicity, age groups, and all those other characteristics which might be impacted. We'll then ask 2 questions. What is the impact against this characteristic, and how can you mitigate against this characteristic? What thought would you put into this question, Sal? The impact.
But just to give an example, because obviously we're talking about a theoretical example here, Danny, and we're talking about the move of a leisure centre from one area to another area of Birmingham. So here, if I was looking at age, just in terms of the location move, I think there could be 2 potential impacts. Citizens who are younger and who can't drive independently, they may suffer if the chosen location is less accessible, like by pedestrian routes and or public transport. Also, citizens who are older, they may find access more difficult if the location changes and travel distances from bus stops or the quality of public transport services or even the topography of routes from bus stops to the venues is less easily travelled. Now, theoretical example, but there's 2 examples there where there may well be a negative impact.
Okay. Due to the move, there's here.
It's also fair to say here, Danny, like what we're doing here is identifying a negative impact. Sometimes there may be positive impacts. And if we have a positive impact, we should articulate that as well. The key thing here is just to show your thinking.
For the purposes of demonstrations, we're going to keep the answers brief, but you can go into much greater detail. Each box allows up to 4,000 characters, which is quite lengthy. Give as much detail as you can to avoid this having to bounce backwards and forwards, and give it all through one submission. And here you get to detail how you can mitigate against these problems. So for this example, we may provide free bus transport between those routes. We may partner with other transport companies to see how they might want to work. So detail in there how you would mitigate those negative impacts. Now we're going to get into disability. First of all, we are going to define what disability is, because most people may not be aware exactly what is a disability. And we can have things to consider. So physical access Format our information. Is it accessible? Is an interpreter needed? So we're going to help you think, are any of these characteristics potentially going to impact your project? Again, key facts, more information, and we'll ask for more information around the question. Anything to add on disability, Sal? Things they should consider?
No, I think what we're trying to do here, as it'll become clear as we go through the form, is to give you the headline information there at the start. So the key facts are there in terms of the kind of background for Birmingham, but then, you know, by accessing the kind of information and the observatory, it gives you the breakdown by ward. It's just stepping through and considering the various potential impacts it could have on disability. And I think the form just really kind of signposts that very clearly.
So we're not going to fill out much more of the form at this point. We're just going to go through and talk about each of the characteristics and the thought that you can put into helping to ensure that you don't discriminate against each of those characteristics. Gender. Gender refers to, if we say yes briefly, to male, female, and all the other genders that people wish to identify by. You have to consider your project. Is any one gender going to be more adversely affected, discriminated against, or is it going to benefit, as Sal said? Is it going to benefit any one gender? Any thoughts on this one, Sal?
Yeah, it's that point again, Danny, isn't it? It's actually thinking about, is this going to have an impact, both positive and negative? Sometimes with gender, you know, the caregiving aspect can come into play. We know women have largely more caregiving responsibilities in terms of children, and sometimes proposals can have an impact that way. Sometimes that isn't kind of brought into thinking. That's just one example, but it's just being alive to the kind of step-by-step thinking against each protected characteristic of where that could be. And again, going back to the data, we have lots of data around the gender splits in the city as well.
Now, it's also worth noting that you may want to combine the thinking of different characteristics. So we're talking about a potential move of a theoretical leisure centre here. The leisure centre is proposing to build a unisex gym. But from your research, you've identified that the gym is going to be located in a region with a particular ethnicity. And you may know that ethnic group is not going to be happy about a unisex gym. Females may not be happy about working out with males. So you then have to consider how that's going to be. How can you mitigate that risk? What accommodations can you make? Do you make a separate area to accommodate female gym goers separate from the males? So start combining different characteristics and have some thought about how working together they might impact one another. Another protected characteristic, gender reassignment. Now, those we define as going through the process of transitioning from one gender to another, or even considering moving through the process. What we'd like to add on this one, Sal?
If we're selecting no, I think it's really, this is an important point, Dan. We just have to spell out our thinking why it's a no. You just have to say, you know, for whatever reason, if for the move of the leisure centre from X location to Y location, why gender reassignment, you don't feel that there's an impact against this particular protected characteristic. No by itself, if we are challenged afterwards, it's not enough. We just have to explain why. And that explanation might be a few lines, it might be longer, but it's something you just have to kind of apply some thinking to.
Marriage and civil partnership. If we click yes, we can see all the different statuses that this may impact. And again, this list is to help you think. You may have not thought, I'm going to impact, it's going to have a positive effect on married people to the same sex, but it's not going to have the same impact to people in a civil partnership in the same sex. So we try and give you these little prompts to help you think about, is that going to actually impact those groups? Anything to add on your thoughts for that one, Sal?
It's a slightly different point, but obviously each proposal will have different impacts. So what we're saying is the form is there to help you step through the thinking, but obviously each proposal or each change or anything you're trying to do here in terms of a change or an amendment will have a different set of impacts. So this form is not about going through everything and being required to put detailed rationale against absolutely everything. It depends on where you feel the impact is and rooting it back to evidence always.
Thank you. Pregnancy and maternity. So things to consider here are, does it provide equal access to those who are pregnant or undergoing pregnant or maternity leave? Equality of opportunity in relation to healthcare for women, irrespective of whether they are pregnant or maternity leave, and the unlawful treatment of a woman favorably because of that she is breastfeeding. So we're talking about a leisure centre here. Is there going to be accommodations for people who wish to breastfeed? Are you accepting that people may breastfeed in public, or do you want to provide a separate area? Again, use the tools and consider, is something like this going to be impacted by ethnicity as well? Is ethnicity and religion and beliefs going to play into what you're planning to put in place? And is it going to accommodate those? So for this one, we only ask for you to have the impact and the mitigations. Ethnicity and race, a big one, especially in a super diverse city like Birmingham. Make sure you use the tools on the observatory to understand the demography of where you're planning to work with your proposal. And in here, again, we will also expand as to what ethnic groups are going to be impacted by this. And you may have ones in there that you might not have considered. Sal, what would you like to add on this one?
Now, rooting it back to Birmingham, we know that in some of our wards are the most economically deprived wards in the country, but they have a significantly high representation of ethnic minorities, South Asian in some of the most deprived wards. So in terms of a change of location of a leisure centre, if those wards that you're kind of moving to, they have a high representation of ethnic minorities, then although socioeconomic kind of disadvantage is not an individual protected characteristic, if as a result of a change there's a disproportionate impact on, say, the South Asian heritage community, because they will have to pay more to travel to this location, then that does become a relevant consideration, because you may well be indirectly discriminating against the South Asian community because they are going to be disadvantaged financially in a much more acute way as a result of the change of location here.
Thank you. Religion or beliefs. Again, we'll see what religions are potentially high-level religions we're going to be impacted by this particular proposal. This is probably very similar to Sal's previous comments, is ensuring that any particular group are not going to be impacted because of what you're proposing. What would you like to add on this one, Sal?
No, I think the previous comment really stands, Danny. It's looking at the ward, looking at the demography, and the great thing is that we do have a lot of kind of statistical breakdown here, which we didn't previously have. So it's just understanding that and being aware, well, if there's an impact on ethnicity, there may well be a related correlating impact to do with faith as well and religion.
Now, I'd add on this one, make sure you use the census, but just because someone is from India does not particularly mean that they are of a particular ethnic group. So don't assume people's religious beliefs based on their ethnicity. There is often a correlation, but as the census will show you, there is also disparity. So make sure you review those documents. Sexual orientation, for this one, it's defined as we've got heterosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, queer, and any other sexual orientation. Things to consider are recognition and respect of individuals' sexuality, recognition of same-sex relationships in respect to consent, and the maintenance of confidentiality around individuals' sexuality. So in the example of a leisure centre move, Sal, what would your thoughts be? What process would you go through for that one?
Again, it's identifying, is there an impact? It's starting off with that question. Is there anything as a result of the move that we think could impact against this particular protected characteristic versus the current leisure centre? And it's just stepping through that process without kind of getting into theoretical example, Danny. It's just to be a bit of a bore. If there is, then looking at the kind of breakdown, and it may well be positive instead of just negative. Is this new leisure centre going to, and as a result of its location and maybe design, is it going to be more inclusive? Is it going to be more welcoming to people of different sexuality through the design of the leisure centre? Because there may well be undoubtedly some positive impacts, but articulating that and showing that as part of the EIA is important.
And coming back to the point I made earlier around considering its impact on other attributes, if you did decide, due to its location and ethnic makeup, that you need to have a female-only section, is that female-only section accommodating to those who are undergoing gender reassignment or to those who have particular sexual orientation? So it's all related. The final section of the form, page 21. This is where you mention around monitoring. So once you've done this, you've already mentioned about having a review period. We also need to know how you're going to monitor this and who is going to monitor the project. How would you monitor things, Sal?
I think it'd be really important as part of this process to kind of check in with um, users, with citizens, in terms of how the location move has been, and because you will not you there are things we will try our best to kind of understand pre-implementation, but it's really post-implementation that you will fully understand any potential impacts, and some things which may well come to light afterwards. Now, obviously, in this particular situation, the leisure centre would have been moved, it would have been opened, but by the monitoring process, if there are some unintended or unforeseen um, negative impacts, for instance, the monitoring process will allow us to surface that and, importantly, see what we can do with that. But then, in terms of how we address that may well be a co-production approach. For instance, it may well involve bringing citizens into the heart of that conversation and then working in partnership in terms of what you wanted to do with that. So post-implementation monitoring is really important.
And then the email address, or who's going to be responsible for this. This is all recorded. And that's the end of the form. You can click the box to say send me an email receipt, but once you submit, our little robot will automatically send you a copy of this in Word format for your own records, but also should you need to resubmit this again in the future for amendments. Winging its way to Sal's inbox now is an approval form. He'll have an email asking him to approve or reject, and when you click either button, Sal will be asked to provide comments, which will all be recorded in the system. It's important that you do this process as assistant directors or above, because that's what allows us to record that you've accepted the proposal. And remember, this is all part of a legal requirement. At any point, you can click submit another response, go through the form again, and complete it for every additional form. Sal, any closing words from yourself?
No, thank you, Danny, first of all, for taking us through that. I think the only other point I would add is just to be aware of intersectional impacts, because we deal with real human beings, real citizens, and we are more than one thing. So sometimes the impact can be layered and multi-layered in terms of age, ethnicity, gender, etc., etc. And I think to be conscious of that aspect as well is quite important. But really, bring this thinking as early as you can into the work that you're doing. Put down the information that you think evidences, the impacts. Use the information that we have got in the observatory. I have plugged it a lot, but I'm plugging it because it is there, it's accessible, and it is relevant to Birmingham. But importantly, show your thinking. Sometimes there will not be mitigation possible against a particular impact that you've identified, and you have to just show your thinking as part of this process. We've set up guidance to help step you through this process, and that document and guidance is available to support this. The actual process steps you through what you need to do, but in addition to that, if you need to speak to us, then please contact us in the equalities team, and we will do our best to advise and support, because we need to work together on these challenges.
Thank you all. If you have any questions, Sam mentioned the qualities team. You can find their email address at the beginning of the form and scattered throughout the form as well. They can help you out with anything you may need. Thank you all for your time. Have fun.